past week and a half or so, we ended up seeing a couple of title updates for Black Ops 4. Last week, not this past Tuesday, but the week before that, we ended up getting an update that gave us Nuketown and all things considered. PlayStation 4, of course, getting that first, but in that, we started to see our first main weapon tuning pass as of the past week or so, in which we've gotten a few things here and there since adjusted even further, but that was one of the big things that was a part of that update. And as of this past week, we ended up getting, again, a smaller little pass, but still some weapons were adjusted and fine-tuned a little further. So today I want to take a look at the most improved weapons here with you guys. 4 weapons are up on the chopping block here in this video, and we'll talk to you guys about why they're better, why you should use them, and then give you a little class setup as well with them. So that said, let's just jump right into it. The first one up on deck here with this deals with an SMG, one that honestly I've classified and critiqued pretty harshly back in the past, but it's actually gotten a lot better, that being the Spitfire. When you take a look at the patch notes, sure, it might not seem like a whole lot, but in terms of feel, it is a noticeable difference. So for this out of the past update that we ended up having for this, it increased the 6-hit kill range by 3 meters in multiplayer only. So that doesn't affect Blackout or anything like that, though it's still a fantastic weapon in Blackout just because of close quarters encounters being so vital and crucial that something that can rip through enemies that fast is definitely key. But in multiplayer, that 6-hit kill range is actually pretty important. Though it is, in terms of damage, one of the lower end of the spectrum for weapons and what it can do for damage output, the fire rate makes up for it greatly, and having that extra little bit of range honestly is a fantastic attribute to have here on this. Now it's only 3 meters in game, but it does translate into a noticeable difference once again. And the other adjustment here with this was that it slightly increased the ADS move speed. Now there is a stock attachment for the Spitfire, but without it, it's actually still pretty solid. If you're somebody that likes to pre-aim corners, you're of course going to have a less of a mobility penalty because it is an SMG, the most mobile of weapon classes within Black Ops 4, but it still is incredibly manageable. You don't necessarily need a stock as of that, which is great that it frees it up because you have things like extended mags for any mitigation for how fast you're pumping through ammo. You have fast mags which allow you to play that fast and loose gameplay and reload and get back into the action quicker. You have your laser sight if you don't really want to aim down sight all that much or you get into a situation where it's not as practical. There's so many different attachments that you could replace in terms of that stock. If you end up using the stock, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It just gives you a little bit more on top of the base mobility. But that said, it is something that is noticeable, and if you're a run and gun player, it's honestly one that I'd recommend giving a go. I had a complete 180 in terms of feel for this based off of this update and where I was just a few weeks ago in terms of my enjoyment with this weapon. Now in terms of class setup, it really comes down to how ranked up you are in this weapon's progression. If you're earlier on, you can get away with some of the things that are early in the progression, like a laser sight, like an extended mags, and you'll be totally fine. But again, if you want to pop on some things like a fast mag, like a stock, like a quick draw, that is absolutely fantastic. And if I were to say to go big, I'd end up probably running an ideal class setup of extended mags, quick draw, fast mags, and stock. Maybe the stock is a little bit of replaceable there because, again, like we mentioned, the base default movement speed ADS isn't all that bad anymore. But that comes down to you. I know that in the gameplay in this one, I wasn't really ranked up here with this weapon as much, but I ended up running the laser sight and the extended mags with a perk setup of Scavenger, Lightweight, Ghost, and Dead Silence with a gear of Stim. So a sort of standard class setup here with this. But moving along into the second weapon we'll talk about, that will be the Swordfish Tactical Rifle. Now, this was actually touched on both occasions for the title updates, both a week and a half ago or so, and plus this past Tuesday that just happened. We ended up seeing an update more so on the first end of that on the 13th, but we also ended up getting a little more to make it even better on the 20th. So all around, this thing got a pretty solid buff, but on the 13th, it ended up getting a buff to slightly reduce the delay between bursts, so you can end up shooting a little bit faster than you could before. It reduced the idle sway, and then for the Penta Burst Operator mod, it now implements the standard burst delay, whereas it was a little bit delayed more so than the standard beforehand. Now after that, we ended up seeing this past Tuesday, it also got a secondary update in which it reduced the upward recoil to achieve a more accurate burst. So when you look at all those factors, it was much better than it was before. It ended up getting an all-around buff to pretty much every aspect that was rather in question beforehand, and now it's just really solid. I actually even used the permanent unlock token here for this, so I can end up not only working on headshots that I'm still going for, but also so I can have it early on in game. And this is one that you'll want to definitely rank up though, because if you play with it on the lower ends, I had to do that a lot actually within today whenever I was going for some of these gameplays. But when you take a look at the Swordfish, you can can get away with things like a reflex sight, a quick draw, and FMJ, and you of course later on get things like long barrel, high caliber, quick draw 2. Those of course all make great class setups when they're attached, but the big thing that you really still want to go for here is the Penta Burst Operator mod. Not only because now it has a standard burst delay that is in line with the rest of the gun, so it doesn't hinder as much as it did before, but you're rarely going to one burst somebody without the Penta Burst Operator mod. Unless you end up hitting an entire burst on somebody's head for all 3 shots to count and get that extra multiplier, you're going to end up having to put 2 bursts in. But if you use the Penta Burst, that's where it becomes deadly. That's where it becomes a very big powerhouse that will shred through enemies. It's like the M8A7 from previous games in Call of Duty, but on steroids, essentially. So this thing, definitely end up running the Penta Burst if you have it unlocked. If you don't, try and rank it up as much as possible to end up getting that Penta Burst, so that you end up using an operator mod of the Penta Burst, and maybe things like Quick Draw 1 and 2, maybe long barrel or high caliber thrown in the mix there as well, but that's going to cost you quite a bit in terms of your pick 10 create a class system. But in terms of what I used in the gameplay in the background, it's again nothing too major. I ended up using an optic of the reflex simply because I cannot stand the default optic on the swordfish, and there's no elo, so it's something that the more pinpoint precise I can be, I'm more so okay with that. Then I ended up running a quick draw and an FMJ class setup here at this one, and also with the gear of Stim Shot, then Scavenger, Lightweight, Dead Silence, and Ghost as our perk setup. So it's something that works out well, and of course I'd recommend that, but also if you have the opportunity, if you have it unlocked, definitely sacrifice some of those perks or an attachment of some sort so you can end up getting the Penta Burst Operator mod, and you'll be one bursting people into oblivion. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the Rampart 17, because this was one that actually was pretty solid before this update, but as of the 13th, I believe it was, it ended up getting actually a solid buff here to it. So for that buff at that time, it was a reduction of the idle sway. It was a slightly reduced recoil on the first and third shots whenever you're ending up firing, and you also ended up getting an increased 4-hit kill range by 3 meters in multiplayer only, which again, anytime you can end up extending that max damage range, that's insane. That's absolutely crucial and something that you really should take advantage of. Of course, you end up throwing on something like a long barrel on some weapons that end up having that, and you have the option to end up extending that a little further. But of course, with those 3 things added into the mix, the Rampart was already a good weapon, but that's why you probably saw a bunch of people in your sub boxes potentially making videos called Rampart 2.0 or OP Rampart class setup, whatever it is. It's just something that actually does warrant some talk about it, because it did get a significant buff in the last week or so. But that said, when we take a look at this, it's very suited once again towards mid-range engagements. Not necessarily long-range engagements, simply because of how it ends up working out with its recoil, and that damage drop-off, though it did get extended, is still something significant that at range, it's not going to win out a gunfight against a skilled sniper or anything like that. There is no grip 2 that completely mitigates all recoil and spray patterns that end up resulting here from this, but you can end up doing great things with other class setups as well. Plus, again, reduction in idle sway, that reduced recoil on 1 and 3 for those shots, fantastic. And of course, who's going to try and argue to take damage away from you in terms of that range? But what I end up running here on this is something of a high caliber 1 and 2 attachment, so you end up getting that max damage, but you also end up getting a little bit of a multiplier on the upper chest and up for that. So you end up having that 4-hit kill range a little more solidified, and then also a grip once again to sort of mitigate that recoil, because I still am not the biggest fan of how the recoil works within the Rampart 17. It's not all that bad, but it's also not fantastic by any means. Then of course you end up seeing in the gameplay, we've run an optic of the reflex sight. There again is no elo, so a little bummer here on that one, at least on my end, but I'm not a huge fan of the iron sights of the Rampart. And I know that might sound crazy because they're not all that bad, just not a huge fan. Then we run Stim Shot, then we end up running perks of Scavenger, Lightweight, and Dead Silence. You can, of course, end up sacrificing Lightweight for things like Gung Ho. The gameplay that you're watching in the background was recorded before I ended up getting Gung Ho, so little disclaimer there. I'll definitely pop that on in regular class setups, but as for the rest, it's pretty standard for what I use. And the final weapon we'll talk about today actually is one that is already a fantastic weapon and one of the best weapons overall in the game. That's going to be the Maddox though, because believe it or not, it actually got a buff on top of how good it already is in terms of recent updates. Now, it's in a very particular area and one that you might not want to sacrifice your pick 10 slots for, without dealing with the operator mod of the Echo Fire. For those of you guys that don't know what the Echo Fire Operator mod does, it is essentially a double tap, but it's something that the second shot is fired off at a faster fire rate than that of your standard stream of bullets. So you end up shooting in pairs of 2 almost, so it's almost a burst weapon, but I wouldn't consider it that. But it's something that if you end up hitting, say, a headshot 1 and 2, it's definitely going to help out tremendously in getting that kill a lot faster. So in terms of what it does, it essentially just is an increase to that fire rate and changes a little bit of the dynamic of how the weapon itself plays out, but it ended up removing the recoil penalty when this was equipped. Beforehand, it actually skyrocketed your weapon, so you'd want to probably aim for stomach or upper chest so that whenever you keep going, your shots will kind of go up and you'll end up getting a headshot out of that recoil, but it's now almost a laser pointer in terms of that. So when you have 2 shots going off in such quick succession, that's dangerous whenever you have no recoil as well. So while there is no grip attachment to completely mitigate any recoil penalty at all, it's still something that's incredibly easy to manage, and you pop on something like what you'll see in the gameplay of an ELO sight, which again is probably my favorite sight in Black Ops 4, then a quick draw and a stock, so you can end up getting your weapon up faster for a gunfight, and also strafing and having that ability to pre-aim corners, plus the Echo Fire Operator mod. It's a fantastic class loadout. Then things like Stim Shot, Scavenger, and Ghost round out that class setup and give me something that I think is a very fantastic way to play the game with this operator mod on the Maddox RFB. But that said, that's where we're gonna wrap it up here at this one, because that is 4 weapons that honestly were already pretty solid and I think are absolutely just above and beyond now with these most recent updates to them. We ended up getting 2 title updates quickly in succession, so I wanted to hold off here on this to kind of see what the result will be when the dust settled, and this is what I got here for you guys. So if you want to check these out, definitely go in, create some classes with them, and use the strong points to your advantage like we mentioned here in this video. Some of the updated pieces will definitely suit you very well here, so give it a shot. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of these classes? What do you think of these weapons that they got some buffs to them? Do you think that some are a little overkill? Do you think some maybe should need some nerfs? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. Of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, multiplayer, Blackout, zombies, you name it. We got you covered with the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, best class setup, all that good stuff. We got you covered here on the channel. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected with me outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. So if you guys want to check those out, those are linked in the description below. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Have fun with these classes and new updated weapons. I'll see you later. Peace.